The cabin lights dimmed gently as Flight 427 settled into its cruising altitude. Outside the window, the patchwork of clouds stretched endlessly, a sea of white beneath the plane's wing. Elena Ramirez, seated near the middle of the economy cabin, leaned her head against the cool glass and closed her eyes. It had been a long morning rushing to finish last-minute reports for a tech conference in Denver, navigating traffic snarls to get to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. And now, the hum of the engines and the steady motion of the plane provided an almost soothing rhythm. At 32, Elena was used to flying for work. As a systems analyst for a major defense contractor, she specialized in cybersecurity and software integration for military projects. Her job was demanding but rewarding, and travel was just part of the routine. Yet, today's flight felt different, though she couldn't say why. Maybe it was just the exhaustion catching up, or the dull ache in her wrist from hours spent typing at her desk. The man beside her, a business traveler engrossed in his laptop, barely glanced up as Elena adjusted the volume on her headphones. She liked to listen to classical music during flights, something to drown out the chatter of other passengers and the occasional squeal of a baby in the rows ahead. Today, the music didn't quite reach her ears. A low-tension buzz lingered at the edge of her thoughts. Suddenly, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've just received a request for a minor reroute due to air traffic congestion near Denver International. We expect to be on schedule, and I'll keep you updated." The announcement was routine enough. Elena barely registered it until her phone buzzed softly in her jacket pocket, a rare sound, given she usually kept it on airplane mode. She glanced at the screen. A message from her supervisor at the office, short and cryptic. "Call me ASAP, urgent." She frowned but tucked the phone away. This wasn't the time or place to take calls. She was halfway across the country, and business would have to wait. Minutes passed. The gentle hum of the engines filled the cabin again, but Elena felt a shift in the atmosphere. Overhead compartments clicked shut with unusual force, and the flight attendants moved through the aisles with brisk, purposeful steps. Some exchanged brief, worried glances. Elena's curiosity piqued as the seatbelt signs flickered on unexpectedly. The pilot's voice came again, this time tighter, more strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing an unexpected situation and will be making a detour around restricted airspace. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We appreciate your cooperation." From her seat, Elena noticed the subtle tension among the crew. Flight attendants whispered in hushed tones near the front, casting worried looks toward the cockpit. A man a few rows ahead, an older gentleman in a tailored suit, pulled out his phone, typing furiously, his knuckles white. Then, a sudden flash outside the window caught Elena's eye. She turned to see two fighter jets streaking parallel to their plane, sleek and imposing, their metallic bodies gleaming against the sunlight. The unmistakable silhouettes of F-22 Raptors. The cabin collectively held its breath. The hum of the commercial jet was swallowed by the roar of the fighters' afterburners as they maintained formation beside Flight 427. Elena's stomach tightened. This wasn't standard procedure. Escort fighters didn't simply appear for random flights. Over the radio, a new voice interrupted air traffic control chatter. It was calm but authoritative. "This is Eagle One. We require immediate clearance to intercept and escort commercial flight 427. Authorization must be granted under..." The name Elena Ramirez. The word sent a shockwave through the control tower, and the aircraft alike. Under the name Elena Ramirez? A Denver Air Route Traffic Control Supervisor blinked in disbelief. "That's impossible. We have no clearance procedures under a civilian name." The radio crackled, the F-22 pilots repeating their request with clinical precision. Elena Ramirez is the designated command authority. Clearance must be processed under that name. Back in her seat, Elena felt a chill creep up her spine. She looked around. The passengers were visibly unsettled now, some whispering nervously, others staring at the jets outside as if they had suddenly become symbols of impending danger. The cabin crew hurried to reassure passengers, their practiced smiles strained. The pilot's voice came again, calmer this time, but with a firm edge. "Folks, we've received direct orders from NORAD. Please stay seated. The military jets are here to ensure the safety of this flight. We're working with the ground controllers to resolve the situation." Elena's mind raced. Her name. How could this be? She was just a passenger, a civilian with no military rank or authority. Her thoughts flew back to the strange file she'd accidentally opened 2 weeks ago at work, the one she'd reported and forgotten. Could that possibly be connected? The plane's movements became noticeably deliberate. The pilot communicated with the fighters in ground control, navigating a complex aerial ballet to avoid restricted zones and reroute around a mysterious no-fly area suddenly activated near Denver. In the cockpit, 2 flight attendants silently exchanged glances. One caught Elena's eye and offered a small, reassuring nod before slipping away. A few moments later, the cockpit door opened, and the pilot stepped out. His face was pale but controlled. "Ms. Ramirez, would you please come to the cockpit? It's urgent." Elena's heart pounded as she rose, gathering her bag quickly. The other passengers watched her curiously, whispers buzzing like static. She followed the flight attendant down the narrow aisle, past rows of anxious faces, and into the cockpit where the pilot and co-pilot sat tensely. "Ms. Ramirez," the pilot said quietly, "I need you to help us. The military believes you have clearance authority over this flight. They're waiting for you to respond to their radio queries." Elena blinked in disbelief. "I don't understand. I'm just a passenger." He shook his head. "We don't know why, but they say you're the only one who can authorize the next steps." Her throat tightened. She looked out at the 2 F-22s outside the window, their pilots locked on her plane with sharp eyes and radios keyed. For a moment, she felt suspended in a nightmare where reality and mystery collided. She was just a systems analyst. Her job was to fix problems in code, not command fighter jets or dictate military maneuvers. But now, the entire weight of a national security crisis had been thrust on her shoulders, and the flight to Denver had transformed into a mission she never asked for. The plane lurched slightly as the pilots adjusted course, the sky outside both familiar and alien, a battlefield where a civilian woman had become the unexpected linchpin. Elena took a deep breath, realizing her ordinary life was about to be forever changed. The cockpit felt claustrophobic to Elena, though the cabin outside stretched wide and endless beneath the wing. The pilot's steady gaze met hers, but his eyes were shadowed by confusion and worry. Beside him, the co-pilot was already keyed into a secure military channel, fingers dancing over the radio controls. The noise of the commercial flight faded into the background, the hum of engines, the distant murmur of passengers, and was replaced by the tense crackle of encrypted military communications. "Elena," the pilot said quietly, "I'm sorry for dragging you into this, but right now, you're the only person who can help." She swallowed hard. "But why?" "I'm just a passenger. I don't have clearance for any of this." The pilot shook his head. "We don't know why your name came up, but the F-22 pilots say that all clearance and communication must be conducted under your authorization. The military command center has tagged you as the designated authority." Elena's mind spun. She tried to make sense of it, but the puzzle pieces refused to fit. Had someone made a mistake? Was this some kind of bizarre prank? She felt the cold sweat bead on her forehead as 1,000 worst-case scenarios flashed through her thoughts. Are you saying they think I'm in charge of military operations? She asked, incredulous. Exactly, the pilot said grimly. They want you to confirm your identity and respond to their commands. Until you do, the situation remains in a holding pattern. You're the key. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She had never even held a security clearance. Her work involved cyber defense for defense contractors, yes, but nothing classified beyond a routine confidential level. She was meticulous, careful, but this was something entirely different. Suddenly, the radio buzzed sharply. The voice of one of the F-22 pilots came through, crisp and professional. Flight 427, this is Eagle 1. Authorization request pending. Please confirm your identity with the authentication phrase. Elena blinked. Authentication phrase? Authentication phrase? She echoed, looking to the pilot. He nodded. They have a security protocol to verify the authorized user. You need to say the phrase exactly as it was said. Elena's mind scrambled. There was no phrase, no code she knew offhand. She hadn't been trained for this, hadn't studied any such thing. What was she supposed to say? Suddenly, a faint whisper of recognition hit her memory. It was buried deep, a fragment she barely recalled. Weeks ago, during a system test, she had stumbled onto a corrupted file. It had strange code snippets, encrypted commands with unusual signatures. At the time, she'd brushed it off as a software glitch and filed a report. But within that file, she'd inadvertently triggered a hidden access key, embedded with a phrase one she'd heard only once, whispered in passing at a classified briefing she'd attended in her early days. Her lips trembled as she recalled it. Vigilance is the shield. Taking a deep breath, she leaned forward to the microphone and repeated the phrase. Vigilance is the shield. Static filled the cockpit for a tense moment. Then the voice returned, this time with a hint of relief. Authorization confirmed. Welcome, Commander Ramirez. Elena's stomach twisted. Commander? There was no way she was a commander. She was just Elena, the quiet analyst, who had wanted nothing more than a peaceful flight to Denver. A pilot clapped a hand on her shoulder. Congratulations. You're in charge now. Her heart hammered as she took in the weight of that statement. The F-22s closed formation on the jet, their sleek gray forms cutting through the sky like steel sharks. Their pilots awaited her instructions, ready to act. A wave of questions crashed over Elena. Who had designated her? What was happening? Why was she the authority on a mission that could affect national security? Before she could voice her doubts, a call came in over the secure channel. A voice she didn't recognize, cold and clipped, filled the cockpit. This is NORAD Command. Miss Ramirez, you have been assigned as the controlling authority for a live security incident involving Project Atlas. You are the final override to abort the satellite strike sequence. Failure to respond will result in automatic engagement. Elena froze. Satellite strike sequence? She had heard of Project Atlas, a long-abandoned Cold War initiative involving orbital weapons, a relic no one talked about anymore. It was supposed to be defunct. How could it be active? And how could she possibly control it? The pilot's voice broke through her panic. Elena, Project Atlas is an orbital weapons platform. It's been accidentally reactivated. The corrupted data packet you accessed 2 weeks ago linked your biometric ID as the override authority. You have the power and the responsibility to stop the strike. Her breath hitched. The corrupted file. The data packet she had accessed without knowing its true nature. She hadn't realized then she was triggering a mechanism that assigned her as the key controller of a potentially catastrophic weapon. Elena's mind raced as the jet veered slightly, escorted by the fighters who maintained tight formation. "Can you override it? Do you know how?" the pilot asked. She shook her head, voice trembling. I don't know. I'm not trained for this." "Then we'll guide you," the co-pilot said, already pulling up technical schematics and encrypted codes on the cockpit screens. "We're linking you to NORAD's secure uplink. You'll have real-time data and instructions." Elena sat stiffly, her eyes flicking between the monitors and the radio. Her hands were clammy, but she forced herself to focus. This wasn't just a nightmare. It was real. The fate of thousands, maybe millions, depended on what she did next. Meanwhile, back in the cabin, the passengers murmured nervously. The presence of the fighters outside was unnerving. Flight attendants moved among the rows, offering calm reassurances, but the tension was palpable. Elena glanced briefly at the window, watching the fighters glide beside them like silent guardians or harbingers of doom. She wondered if the others had any idea what was unfolding. In the cockpit, the radio crackled again. "Commander Ramirez, the override sequence requires your biometric confirmation and a manual input of the abort code. Are you prepared to proceed?" Elena's fingers hovered over the console. Her mind was fogged with doubt and fear, but she took a steadying breath and nodded. "Yes, I'm ready." The next moments blurred as she followed the step-by-step guidance, entering codes, verifying biometric scans, and answering encrypted queries. The cockpit filled with rapid exchanges between her, the pilots, and NORAD command. Outside, the F-22s kept a vigilant watch, scanning for any threats while escorting the commercial jet safely through restricted airspace. Then, the unthinkable happened. An alert beeped sharply. The system flagged a breach and authorized attempts to override the abort sequence. Someone or something was trying to stop her. "Elena," the pilot warned, voice tense, "there's interference. You're not just fighting a timer, you're being hacked." She swallowed hard. The corrupted data wasn't just a glitch. It was a trap. She clenched her jaw and refocused on the override. "We have to finish this," she said firmly. "There's no other choice." Minutes felt like hours as she navigated the encrypted systems, guided by fragments of training and sheer instinct. The lives of countless people, the safety of the nation, balanced precariously on her resolve. Finally, the cockpit computer chimed a single word flashing across the screen. Aborted. The strike sequence was canceled. The tension broke like a wave. The pilots exchanged relieved glances. The radio burst into congratulatory chatter from NORAD command. Elena sank back in her seat, trembling but alive. The pilot smiled faintly. "You just saved us all." As Flight 427 began its descent toward Denver, escorted still by the F-22s, Elena stared out at the horizon. Her ordinary flight had turned into a mission that no one could have imagined, one where a passenger became a commander, and an analyst became the nation's last hope. But the questions remained. How had she been chosen? What else was hidden in that corrupted file? And what dangers still lurked in the shadows? Elena Ramirez was no longer just a passenger. She was a key player in a story far bigger than herself. 2 weeks earlier, long before the jet fighters appeared in formation, and Elena Ramirez found herself suddenly designated a commander. Her life had been utterly ordinary. A quiet rhythm of work, coffee breaks, and long hours in the tech lab. She was far from the cockpit of any plane or the command center of a military base. She was simply a systems analyst, skilled, but unremarkable in the grand scheme of classified operations. At the defense contracting firm in Arlington, Virginia, where she worked, Elena was part of a small team responsible for testing software updates for military communication systems. Their job was to catch glitches, fix bugs, and ensure that sensitive data transferred securely across government networks. It was precise Meticulous work. No place for mistakes, no room for errors. It was on a rainy Wednesday afternoon that everything changed. Elena sat at her workstation, the dull buzz of fluorescent lights overhead, rain tapping against the window behind her. The screens in front of her displayed lines of code, an encrypted software patch slated for the Department of Defense's satellite communication system. She was running a routine diagnostic when an anomaly popped up, a corrupted data packet. At first, it seemed like a simple error, something to flag and pass along to the team lead. But as Elena probed deeper, the corrupted file revealed an unexpected complexity. The code was unlike anything she'd encountered before, layered with multiple levels of encryption and hidden commands that bypassed normal security protocols. Curiosity piqued. She isolated the packet on a secure server and began reverse engineering it in her spare time. The file contained cryptic strings referencing Project Atlas, an override sequence. Elena frowned. Project Atlas was a Cold War-era initiative involving orbital weaponry, supposedly decommissioned decades ago. Why was it in an active data file? As she dug further, she discovered something even stranger. The corrupted file included a biometric signature, her own. Somehow, her personal digital ID had been embedded in the system as an authorized user. The implications struck her like a lightning bolt. Had she triggered a dormant access key simply by opening the file? Was she now linked to this mysterious project in some unknown way? Her attempts to report the anomaly met bureaucratic resistance. The project lead dismissed it as a routine glitch, assuring her it posed no threat. But Elena wasn't convinced. Something was wrong. Determined to find answers, she contacted a trusted colleague with a higher-level clearance. But the reply was cautious and cryptic. Stop digging. Elena, this is bigger than you think. That warning echoed in her mind as she boarded the plane bound for Denver, unaware that the corrupted file had already set events into motion. Back on the flight, her thoughts raced, piecing together the strange connection between the data file and the military's sudden demand for clearance under her name. In the cockpit, the pilot glanced at her expectantly. Elena, you're linked to a classified override system embedded deep within Project Atlas. The corrupted file you accessed inadvertently reactivated the satellite strike protocol, naming you as the authorized controller. We need you to help us stop the system before it executes a strike. Elena's pulse quickened. I'm just a systems analyst. I don't have the training to do that. You have the unique biometric link required to authenticate the abort sequence, the co-pilot explained. No one else can do it. As the plane cruised over the Rockies, the digital screens in front of Elena displayed a live feed of satellite telemetry, encrypted signals flashing in real time. She watched in awe and horror as she realized the weapon system was operational and counting down. Her fingers hovered over the controls, unsure, trembling. The responsibility was crushing. Tell me everything you know about this file, the pilot said gently. We need to understand what we're dealing with. Elena recounted every detail she remembered, her voice steady as she spoke. She described the corrupted data packet, the hidden code, and the biometric signature embedded within. She explained the warnings she had received and the shadowy resistance to investigating further. The pilot nodded slowly. This isn't just a glitch. It's a deliberate trap. Someone wanted to reactivate the weapon and hide the authorization under your identity. Elena swallowed hard. But why me? I'm nobody important. Sometimes, the co-pilot said, the most dangerous place to hide is in plain sight. Suddenly, the radio crackled with another message from NORAD, Commander Ramirez. We are detecting multiple interference attempts to the override system. The strike sequence is advancing despite your intervention. You must complete the manual abort procedure immediately. Elena's heart pounded. She glanced at the security protocols flashing on the screen's complex, layers of encryption that no ordinary civilian should be able to access. Yet here she was, forced to master them in minutes. "Can you do this?" the pilot asked. "I have to," Elena replied, steeling herself. "There's no choice." As the plane descended closer to Denver, she immersed herself in the code, working through each step with focused determination. Memories of her programming classes and late nights debugging flooded back, mingling with the adrenaline surging through her veins. In the cabin, passengers remained oblivious to the ticking clock of global disaster unfolding above them. Some napped, others scrolled through phones, unaware that the woman near the center aisle was now the linchpin in a national security crisis. Outside the windows, the F-22s continued their silent vigil, eyes sharp and engines roaring softly. Elena drew strength from their presence, the knowledge that she wasn't alone. The minutes slipped by like hours. Finally, the cockpit screens flashed a confirmation. Abort sequence initiated. Strike canceled. A wave of relief washed over Elena. She exhaled, trembling. The pilot smiled. "You did it, Elena. You saved countless lives." Her eyes met his, gratitude and disbelief swirling in equal measure. But even as the crisis eased, the questions remained. Who had set the trap? Why had the corrupted file been disguised to link to her identity? And what dangers were still lurking, hidden in the shadows of forgotten projects? The flight continued its approach to Denver International Airport, escorted still by the fighters who now eased their formation. Elena felt the weight of a secret she could never share, a secret that had transformed her from an ordinary passenger to a pivotal guardian of the nation. As the plane touched down, she knew her life would never be the same. Somewhere deep in the labyrinth of classified files and encrypted data, the truth waited, and so did the next threat. Elena Ramirez sat in the sterile conference room at Denver International Airport, the weight of the last few hours pressing heavily on her shoulders. The hum of fluorescent lights above was a stark contrast to the chaotic storm she had just weathered. Her hands, still trembling slightly from the adrenaline rush, gripped the edge of the polished table. Across from her sat two men in crisp military uniforms, NORAD officers, their faces unreadable, but their eyes sharp and calculating. "Commander Ramirez," one of them began, voice low and measured, "we owe you a debt of gratitude. Your actions prevented a catastrophic event." Elena swallowed hard, feeling the unfamiliar title again. Commander. She was still coming to terms with it. The other officer, younger and with a more direct gaze, leaned forward. "We need to discuss the details of what happened in the air. The reactivation of Project Atlas was no accident." Elena nodded slowly. "I know. The corrupted file I accessed, it wasn't a glitch. Someone deliberately embedded the override authorization in my biometric ID, but I don't understand why. And I don't know who did it." A heavy silence hung between them. The room seemed to close in. "The fact that the system recognized your biometric signature," the senior officer said, "means you were set up as the trigger from the very beginning. Whoever created that file has access to classified systems at a level beyond what we've seen before." Elena's mind raced. The implications were terrifying. This wasn't just a rogue hacker or an isolated breach. This was a coordinated attack, someone with intimate knowledge of military infrastructure and clearance to manipulate it. "Have you any suspects?" she asked quietly. The younger officer shook his head. "Not yet. But we're investigating leads inside and outside the government. The fact that the corrupted file was disguised as routine software makes it clear. This is espionage. Sabotage." Elena thought back to her days at the firm, to whispered warnings from a colleague who told her to stop digging. Could that person have been involved? Or was the enemy deeper, more hidden? As the officers outlined the immediate next step security protocols, debriefings, and containment strategies, Elena felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She was no longer a bystander. She had been dragged into a shadow war. Later, alone in a quiet corner of the airport lounge, Elena pulled out her phone. Messages flooded in emails from her company's IT department, notifications from her supervisor, even a brief voicemail from her mother, filled with concern. But one message stood out. It was encrypted, sent from an unknown number, containing just a single line. "They're watching. Trust no one." Her fingers hovered over the screen. Who was warning her? And who exactly was they? The next days passed in a blur. The military insisted she remain under protective custody, whisking her from one secure location to another. Her identity, once private, was now public knowledge among top security officials. She was debriefed repeatedly, questioned about the corrupted file, and briefed on Project Atlas in painstaking detail. What she learned was chilling. Project Atlas, once thought decommissioned, was an orbital weapons platform designed during the Cold War. It was capable of delivering precision strikes from space, with devastating power. The system had been shut down decades ago, but remnants of its code remained buried deep in military networks, forgotten, but not erased. The corrupted file had reactivated this dormant weapon, setting it on a countdown that could have led to disaster. Elena struggled to absorb the weight of that knowledge. She had accidentally triggered a weapon that could have wiped out entire cities. The thought was almost too much to bear. Meanwhile, security teams combed through digital footprints, searching for the saboteurs. Initial findings suggested an insider threat, mole within the defense contractor, or even military ranks who had planted the corrupted file and tied it to Elena's ID. Her colleagues at work were questioned, some detained for further inquiry. Rumors circulated of leaked information and deep-rooted conspiracies. Elena herself became a figure of intrigue and suspicion. Some hailed her as a hero, while others whispered doubts about how her biometric signature ended up linked to such a dangerous system. Through it all, Elena kept her focus on one thing: uncovering the truth. She reviewed every email, every file she'd accessed in recent weeks. She spoke quietly to trusted friends and colleagues, trying to piece together the shadowy puzzle. One evening, as she sat alone in her secure room, her phone buzzed again. This time, a video file arrived, encrypted and marked urgent. Her hands trembled as she decrypted it. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. A dark figure meeting with someone in a crowded urban park. The camera angle suggested surveillance, not a casual recording. The voice on the audio was distorted, but the message was clear. "They have the key," the figure said. "Her identity is the override. We must move quickly before they realize." Elena's heart pounded. The enemy was closer than she'd imagined. She realized that the threat wasn't just about a corrupted file or an old weapon system. It was personal. Someone was targeting her, specifically using her as a pawn in a dangerous game. Determined, she reached out to the NORAD officers, sharing the video and her suspicions. Their response was swift. "Elena, you're now part of a counterintelligence operation," the senior officer explained. "We'll provide resources and protection. But you must be careful. This enemy is well-armed and deeply embedded." The days that followed were a careful balancing act. Elena underwent further security checks and briefings, but also started working closely with cyber specialists and military analysts. Together, they began unraveling the digital trail left by the saboteurs. Slowly, a picture emerged: a network of operatives with ties to foreign intelligence agencies, intent on destabilizing U.S. defense systems. The corrupted file was just the beginning, a test to probe vulnerabilities. Elena's role shifted from analyst to active participant in the hunt for this invisible enemy. She learned to navigate classified information, to interpret coded messages, and to anticipate threats she'd never imagined. Yet the deeper she delved, the more dangerous it became. Her hotel room was searched while she was out. A small device was found hidden in her luggage, an attempt to monitor her communications. Her phone was hacked multiple times, despite the military's advanced encryption. And most chilling of all, she received a handwritten note slipped under her door one night. "Stop asking questions, or you won't live to see tomorrow." Fear gnawed at her, but Elena refused to back down. She understood now that this wasn't just a threat to national security. It was a threat to her life. The unseen enemy was closing in, operating in the shadows, using secrets and lies as weapons. And Elena Ramirez, the accidental commander, had become their target. As she stared out the window of her secure room, watching the city lights twinkle below, she knew one thing with certainty. This was only the beginning. The sound of boots echoed down the narrow hallway as Elena Ramirez walked between two security officers. The building was windowless, hidden in an industrial park on the outskirts of Colorado Springs. The walls smelled faintly of metal and antiseptic. They had moved her again, the third time in less than 2 weeks. Each location more secure than the last. Each time, the stakes felt higher. "Commander Ramirez," said Captain Hart, the older of the two officers, as they approached a heavy steel door. "This is the new operations center. You'll be working here until this matter is resolved." Elena nodded without speaking. She hated the title, Commander. It felt like a costume she'd been forced to wear, one that didn't fit. She had never been military. She had never wanted to be military. Yet the title followed her everywhere now, whispered in corridors, printed on briefing documents, spoken over secure radio channels. The steel door swung open with a hiss of compressed air. Inside was a large, dimly lit room lined with glowing screens. Dozens of analysts and officers sat at consoles, their faces pale from the glow of monitors. In the center of the room stood a raised platform with a single console, reserved for the one person whose biometric ID could still control Project Atlas, Elena. As she stepped inside, the chatter of the analysts quieted. Heads turned. Some faces showed relief, others suspicion. Elena felt the weight of their stares. To them, she was either a hero or a liability. Maybe both. General Sloan, a tall, angular man with steely gray hair, approached her with a curt nod. "Ms. Ramirez, thank you for coming. You'll be briefed in 5 minutes." She followed him into a smaller briefing room off to the side. The walls were plastered with satellite images, schematics of orbital platforms, and encrypted communication logs. At the center of the table lay a single folder marked Top Secret. General Sloan opened it and slid a photo toward her. It showed a man with dark hair, wearing a nondescript suit. He was shaking hands with a defense contractor executive outside a building she recognized, her own office in Arlington. "This is Viktor Lazenko," Sloan said, "a foreign intelligence asset. We believe he's been embedded in your company for years. He's linked to the corrupted file you accessed." Elena stared at the photo. "I've seen him. He gave a presentation once, but I thought he was just a consultant." "He's not," Sloan said. "He's the one who tied your biometric ID to Project Atlas. We believe he intended to use you as a backdoor into the system. Unfortunately for him, you shut the system down before it could execute." Elena felt a rush of cold anger. She had been played, used as a pawn. But she wasn't just angry. She was scared. Because if Victor had done this once, he could do it again. And next time, he wouldn't fail. Sloan leaned forward. "This isn't over. The saboteurs have gone underground, but we're tracking their movements. We need you to continue working with us. Your access makes you uniquely valuable. Elena shook her head. I'm not a soldier. I'm not trained for this. You don't have to be a soldier, Sloane said. You're already their target. Whether you like it or not, you're part of this fight. The words hit her like a physical blow. She wanted to run, to go back to her quiet life, to shut out the glowing screens and encrypted codes. But she couldn't. Not anymore. When they returned to the operations floor, the room was abuzz with activity. A new alert had flashed across the main screen. Project Atlas unauthorized access detected. Elena's pulse spiked. What is it? An analyst called out from his console. Another intrusion attempt, General. Same encryption pattern as last time. Sloane looked at her. They're coming for the system again. We need your help. Elena walked up to the central console, her hands trembling slightly. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was no longer about reluctance. This was about survival. What do you need me to do? She asked. Authenticate and lock them out, Sloane said. You're the only one who can. She placed her hand on the biometric scanner. The console beeped and unlocked, flooding the screen with cascading lines of code. Elena recognized the intrusion signature immediately, the same one she'd seen embedded in the corrupted file. Whoever was trying to break in wasn't just testing the system anymore. They were attempting a full takeover. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. Lines of countercode appeared as she manually blocked access points, rerouting traffic and shutting down compromised nodes. Sweat gathered at her temples. It felt like trying to patch holes in a sinking ship. They're adaptive, she muttered. Every time I close a door, they open another. You can do this, Sloane said quietly. For a moment, she forgot about the watching analysts, the glowing screens, the oppressive title of commander. It was just her and the code, battling an unseen enemy across a digital battlefield. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the intrusion attempts ceased. The console chimed. Access denied. System secure. The room erupted in quiet applause. Elena stepped back from the console, breathing hard. You did it again, Sloane said. They're locked out. But the victory felt hollow. For how long? She asked. They'll try again. Yes, Sloane admitted. But now we're fighting back. He gestured to a side door. Come with me. They walked into a small operations planning room. Maps of the world glowed on the walls, dotted with red markers indicating suspected enemy assets. A digital board tracked Viktor Lezenko's movements. He had vanished somewhere in Eastern Europe. We're going after him, Sloane said. And we need you to help us predict his next move. Elena stared at the map. She wasn't a field agent. She wasn't a spy. But she understood systems, patterns, code. She could see how Victor's actions mirrored the logic of the corrupted file. Each move a test, a probe, a calculated escalation. She realized something else, too. This wasn't just about stopping a man. It was about dismantling a network. A network that might already have its hooks deep inside American defense systems. Give me access to all the data, she said. Every file, every log. I'll find him. Sloane studied her for a moment, then nodded. You're not a soldier, he said. But you're something better, a strategist. Elena felt the weight of his words settle over her. She was no longer just a passenger, no longer just a reluctant authority. She was becoming something else, the one person who could outthink the enemy. Later that night, in her secure quarters, she sat at a small desk with a laptop and stacks of classified files. Her phone buzzed again with another encrypted message. She decrypted it cautiously. They're closer than you think. Don't trust the uniforms. She stared at the screen, her heart hammering. The warning sent a chill through her. If the network had infiltrated her company, what was to stop them from infiltrating the military too? Could Sloan himself be compromised? Could Captain Hart? Could anyone? She closed the laptop and sat back, the glow of the city faint through a small window. She felt the same weight she had felt on the plane, staring at the F-22s outside her window. The same sense of being caught between two worlds. Only now, she wasn't just reacting. She was planning. For the first time since this ordeal began, she stopped feeling like a victim. The enemy had chosen her as a pawn. They had underestimated her. That was their mistake. Elena Ramirez would find them. And when she did, she wouldn't just stop them. She'd end this game for good. Elena Ramirez sat in the dim glow of the operations center, eyes scanning the sea of data streaming across her screen. It was past midnight, but the adrenaline kept her wide awake. The digital battlefield was relentless, the enemy probing, adapting, seeking weaknesses. But Elena was learning their moves, anticipating their next strikes. Slowly, the pieces of the puzzle were coming together. The network behind the Project Atlas sabotage wasn't just a band of rogue hackers or a simple spy ring. It was an intricate web of operatives embedded at multiple levels inside defense contractors, within military ranks, and even among government agencies. The term insider threat barely scratched the surface. The new intelligence she'd gathered was unsettling. "Commander," called out Lieutenant Parks from across the room. He was young but sharp-eyed, one of the analysts assigned to her team. "We've traced several encrypted comms to a server farm in Prague." Elena leaned in. "Is that where Viktor Lazenko is hiding?" "Possibly," Parks replied. "But more importantly, we've identified at least 3 other nodes in Berlin, Moscow, and Kyiv. Looks like a coordinated network." Elena nodded. "And each node is linked to compromised credentials inside the DOD system." The implication was chilling. The enemy had not only reactivated a dormant weapon system, but was maintaining persistent access waiting for the right moment to strike again. "We need to take them offline," she said. "Now." The team mobilized quickly, launching cyber countermeasures designed to sever the network's communication lines. Elena coordinated with military cyber command, feeding them intel and directing defensive protocols. Suddenly, an alert flashed across her screen. Intrusion detected, breach attempt at NORAD secure database. Elena's pulse raced. "What? How?" Park's fingers flew across the keyboard. "They're trying to access the same override protocols. Someone inside is giving them access." Elena's breath caught. The network was deeper than they feared. They had a mole. "Seal all access points," she ordered. "Run a full internal audit." As the teen scrambled to secure the systems, Elena's thoughts turned inward. If a mole existed within NORAD, how many others might be compromised? Could she trust anyone in this room? Her gaze flicked to Captain Hart, standing silently nearby. The man who had escorted her from the airport, who seemed to be her protector. Was he watching? Or was he watching her? A sudden knock at the operations center door startled her. "Come in," Elena called, trying to keep her voice steady. The door creaked open. A woman stepped inside, Lieutenant Sarah Beckett, head of counterintelligence. She carried a tablet loaded with classified reports. "Commander," Beckett said firmly, "we've just intercepted a communication. It's from Viktor Lazenko." Elena's heart pounded. "Play it." The room fell silent as Beckett tapped the screen. A distorted voice filled the space. "Commander Ramirez," the voice said, cold and mocking. "You think you've won? You're a pawn in a game far larger than you imagine. Project Atlas is just the beginning." Elena's fingers clenched. "What do you want?" "To watch the world burn," the voice replied. "And you'll be the key to unlocking chaos." The transmission ended abruptly. Elena turned to Beckett. "Where was this sent from?" "Encrypted through multiple servers," but traced to the Berlin node. She looked around the room. We have to act fast. We need to shut down that node. Sloan appeared at the door, his expression grave. We're planning a coordinated strike on all nodes, he said. But we're dealing with a well-armed network. They won't go down quietly. Elena felt the weight of responsibility crushing her. She was no longer just a systems analyst. She was the linchpin in a high-stakes cyber war with global consequences. The next hours were a blur of intense activity. Military cyber teams launched coordinated strikes on the enemy's network infrastructure. Elena worked with analysts to monitor the effects, closing vulnerabilities and patching breaches. But just as the Berlin node went dark, a new alert streamed across her console. Physical breach attempt, secure facility Denver. Elena's stomach dropped. The enemy wasn't just fighting digitally. They were coming for her in the real world. Security teams were dispatched to investigate. Meanwhile, Elena was rushed to a secure safe room within the facility. As the minutes stretched, every shadow seemed to hold a threat. She thought about the warnings she'd received, the messages telling her not to trust anyone. Was this breach connected to the mole? Or a new adversary? Her thoughts flicked back to Captain Hart, standing guard outside her door. Was he friend or foe? A sudden voice over the intercom startled her. Commander Ramirez, this is Captain Hart. The breach was contained. No unauthorized personnel entered. Relief and suspicion warred inside her. She forced herself to breathe deeply. But the danger was far from over. That night, as Elena lay on the cot in the safe room, a message appeared on her encrypted phone. Meet me at the abandoned airfield outside Denver. Midnight, alone. No signature. The message was a challenge. A trap. But Elena knew she couldn't ignore it. If she was going to root out the unseen enemy, she had to confront them directly. The abandoned airfield was cold and empty, bathed in the pale light of a waning moon. Elena approached cautiously, every nerve alert. A figure stepped from the shadows. A man in a dark coat, face obscured by a hood. You came, the voice said softly. Elena squared her shoulders. Who are you? What do you want? The figure pulled back the hood. It was Victor Lazenko. Elena's breath caught. The man she thought was hiding halfway around the world was here, inches from her. Why? She demanded. Why use me? Why put the world at risk? Victor smiled thinly. Because you're special. You have access no one else does. And because you're smart enough to shut us down. But you failed, Elena said fiercely. Not yet, he replied. This game isn't over. Before she could react, Victor pulled a device from his coat, a small, sleek tablet glowing with encrypted data. This is just the beginning, he said. Project Atlas is only Phase 1. Phase 2 will make this look like child's play. Suddenly, the sound of engines roared in the distance. Elena's heart leapt. F-22 jets appeared, cutting across the sky in formation, the same fighters that had radioed in under her name weeks ago. They swooped down, their presence a silent warning. Victor's eyes narrowed. You have powerful friends, he said. More powerful than you, Elena said, voice steady. The jets circled, a message clear. Elena was under protection. Victor hesitated, then turned and vanished into the night. Alone on the cold tarmac, Elena felt the gravity of the moment. The enemy was real. The stakes were higher than ever. But she wasn't alone. With every step forward, Elena Ramirez was becoming something new. A guardian in the shadows, fighting an invisible war for the soul of her country. The night air was thick with tension as Elena Ramirez returned from the abandoned airfield. The sight of the F-22s overhead still lingered in her mind, stark reminder that despite the invisible battles raging within digital networks, The real world could explode into chaos at any moment. Viktor Lazenko had vanished like a ghost, but his warning echoed louder than ever. Project Atlas was only phase 1. Something far worse was looming. Back inside the fortified operations center, Elena sat down at her console, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders, but determination burning in her eyes. The network had been temporarily disabled, but Victor's cryptic promise gnawed at her. What was phase 2? Commander, Lieutenant Parks called from across the room, breaking her focus. We've been analyzing the tablet Lazenko dropped. It's a dead drop encrypted, but we've cracked the first layer. Elena leaned forward, curiosity sharpening her senses. What does it say? Parks pulled up the decrypted file on the main screen. The message was chilling. Phase 2, The Awakening. Underneath, a string of codes and coordinates scrolled like a digital serpent waiting to strike. Elena recognized the pattern instantly, a new weapon system. Unlike Project Atlas, which was an orbital platform, this was something terrestrial, mobile, and much harder to track. Where are these coordinates? She asked. Across multiple locations, old missile silos, abandoned military bases, and even civilian infrastructure. Parks shook his head. They're gearing up for something big. Elena's mind raced. Victor and his network weren't just trying to control a forgotten Cold War weapon. They were activating a whole new arsenal, scattered and deadly. If they succeeded, the entire national security framework could collapse. She knew what she had to do. Get me everything on these sites' maps, access logs, personnel files, Elena said. We're going in. General Sloan entered the room, looking grim. You're moving fast. What's the plan? We need boots on the ground, Elena replied, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. Recon teams to scout the locations and verify the threat. And we need cyber support to isolate any digital control mechanisms. Sloan nodded. I'll get the approval from the Pentagon. But this will be covert. No public alerts, no leaks. Elena swallowed hard. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just a cyber war, it was a full-scale infiltration. And now, it was her mission to stop it. Over the next several days, the operations center transformed into a hive of activity. Satellite imagery, drone feeds, and intercepted communications were fed into the analysis engine. Elena coordinated closely with field operatives, piecing together the extent of the network's reach. At the same time, the internal security audits continued, attempting to root out the mole. But the enemy was cunning, covering their tracks meticulously. Elena's trust in the people around her waned with every passing hour. One evening, as she reviewed satellite images of a decommissioned missile silo in Wyoming, a realization struck her. The network had found a way to bypass traditional security systems using a novel, AI-driven protocol. This protocol mimicked legitimate command signals so well that even the most advanced defenses were fooled. This is bad, she muttered. They're teaching the system to ignore warnings. Lieutenant Beckett, who had been sitting nearby, looked over Elena's shoulder. Can you shut it down? Elena hesitated. Not yet. But if we can break the code, we might be able to reverse engineer the AI and regain control. The problem was clear. Whoever controlled the AI controlled the weapons. That night, Elena returned to her secure quarters, the weight of responsibility heavy on her. The encrypted phone buzzed again. Another message. The code is in the shadows. Find the cipher. Who was sending these? Friend? Foe? The line had blurred. Determined, Elena dove into the analysis. The AI code had hidden layers, an almost impossible puzzle designed to evade detection. She spent hours dissecting algorithms, running simulations, and testing hypotheses. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The code was based on a historical cipher, an old encryption method called the Visionaire cipher, long thought obsolete, but perfectly suited to conceal data in plain sight. "This is brilliant," Elena murmured. "They're using outdated tech to hide cutting-edge AI." She worked through the night, translating and decoding fragments, until a breakthrough came, a set of command sequences buried deep in the code. Elena realized this was the master key to Project Atlas and the new weapon systems, a control mechanism hidden beneath layers of encryption, accessible only through a complex cipher. If she could crack it, she could regain control of the weapons. The next day, Elena presented her findings to General Sloan and the senior cyber team. "We have a chance to stop this," she said, "but we need full clearance to deploy a counter-cipher that will override the AI control." Sloan nodded gravely. "This will be the most delicate operation yet. If we fail, the enemy could trigger the weapons remotely." Elena felt the enormity of the moment, but pushed fear aside. She was ready. That evening, under tight security, Elena was given access to the master console controlling the new weapon network. Fingers poised over the keyboard, she initiated the override sequence. The system responded instantly. The screens flickered as data flowed like a river of light. Elena fed the counter-cipher into the system, watching for signs of resistance. Suddenly, alarms blared. The enemy was fighting back, launching an aggressive cyber attack to protect their control. Elena's hands flew, blocking access points, rerouting data, and reinforcing firewalls. The operation was a war of wills, and every second counted. Through sheer focus and determination, she managed to penetrate the final layer of encryption. The AI's control protocols began to unravel. The screens displayed a message: "Control override successful. System secure." A wave of relief washed over the room. Elena slumped back, exhaustion threatening to consume her. But the victory was bittersweet. General Sloan approached. "You did it, Commander. But this isn't the end." Elena looked up, weary but resolute. "The network is still out there, fragmented but active. They'll regroup. They'll come back." Her voice was steady, unwavering. "We need to find them all." That night, Elena reviewed personnel logs one last time. The digital breadcrumbs led to a shocking discovery. A senior official, someone with unrestricted access to classified information, had been leaking data for months. The mole was someone she had trusted. Elena's stomach churned. The betrayal cut deep. She prepared to confront the traitor. In a secure conference room, Elena faced the mole, a man named Robert Klein, a high-ranking intelligence officer. Klein's expression was cold, resigned. "You don't understand," he said. "This isn't about betrayal. It's about the future." Elena shook her head. "You endangered millions. You jeopardized the country." Klein smiled sadly. "Sometimes sacrifice is necessary for progress. You're just a pawn in a bigger game, Commander." Elena's eyes narrowed. Not anymore. With Klein's arrest, the internal threat was neutralized. The network's remaining operatives were identified and rounded up in coordinated raids. Weeks later, standing outside the operations center, Elena looked up at the clear Colorado sky. The F-22s still patrolled the skies, a silent testament to vigilance. She had started this journey as an unwilling passenger, thrust into a deadly game she barely understood. Now, she was a commander not just in title, but in spirit. The war against the shadows was far from over, but Elena Ramirez was ready. She wasn't just fighting for her life anymore. She was fighting for the future of her country. And she would never stop. The morning sun poured into the operations center, casting long shadows across the rows of glowing consoles. Elena Ramirez stood at the heart of it all, no longer the reluctant passenger, but the commander, who had unraveled a vast conspiracy threatening the very foundation of national security. Yet, despite the victories, a cold knot of unease tightened in her chest. The war against Project Atlas and its shadow network had revealed something worse. Corruption at the highest levels of power. A secret that could shatter everything. Elana's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Meet me at the base airstrip. No one else. Midnight. The sender was anonymous, but she had a feeling she knew who. She debated telling General Sloan or Captain Hart, but the warning felt urgent, personal. She couldn't afford another leak. Trust had become a rare commodity. That night, the air was crisp and biting as Elena arrived at the secluded base airstrip outside Colorado Springs. The moon hung low, pale, and ghostly. The deserted runway stretched ahead, flanked by dark hangars and empty silos. A single figure waited near an old hangar Captain Hart. "Why here?" Elena asked, voice low. Hart's face was tense. "Because it's safe. For now." She studied him carefully. After everything, was he truly an ally? Or the enemy in disguise? "You've been a mystery since this began," she said. "Why did you help me? Who are you really?" Hart's eyes softened briefly. "I'm a soldier, Ramirez. But more than that, I'm someone who believes in the truth. And the truth is, there's a mole higher up than Klein." Elena's breath caught. "Another traitor?" "Yes," Hart said. "Someone with the power to bury this entire operation. To erase the evidence. To make sure Project Atlas never sees the light of day." The revelation hit her like a thunderclap. The conspiracy was bigger than they feared, reaching into the heart of the government. Suddenly, the sound of engines shattered the silence. A convoy of black SUVs rolled onto the runway, headlights blazing. Hart grabbed Elena's arm. "We need to move, now." They sprinted toward a waiting aircraft, a sleek, unmarked private jet. As they boarded, Elena's mind raced. Who was coming after them? And why? The plane's engines roared to life, slicing through the night sky. Up in the cockpit, Elena sat beside Hart, watching the city lights fade beneath them. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To a secure location," Hart replied. "Somewhere we can expose the truth without interference." Her phone buzzed again, a new message. "They're watching. They've activated the failsafe. Project Atlas will be erased unless stopped." Elena's heart sank. The failsafe was the ultimate weapon, an automatic system designed to destroy all data related to Project Atlas, erasing any trace of the conspiracy. If activated, no evidence would survive. They landed at a remote military base deep in the Rockies. The air was thin and cold, the mountains looming like silent sentinels. Inside a fortified command center, Elena connected to a terminal with direct access to Project Atlas archives. She and Hart worked frantically, downloading classified files, decrypting communications, and compiling evidence. Time was running out. Suddenly, an alarm blared a security breach. Hart reached for his weapon as masked operatives stormed the facility. "Get the files." Their leader barked. "Destroy everything else." Gunfire erupted. Chaos exploded in the room. Elena ducked behind a console, heart pounding. Hart fired back, covering her as she transferred files to a secure drive. The enemy advanced, relentless and well-trained. Just as they cornered Elena, a squad of military reinforcements burst in, guns blazing. The attackers fled into the night. Breathless and shaken, Elena looked at Hart. "This isn't over," she said. "No," Hart agreed. "But we have what we need. The evidence. The proof." Days later, the files were leaked to the press. The story broke worldwide. Project Atlas, the mole within the government, the shadow network. The nation was shaken to its core. Investigations began. Arrests followed. Reforms were promised. Amidst the chaos, Elena remained in the shadows, watching. She had survived. She had fought. But she had also changed. One afternoon, as she stood on a hill overlooking the city, Helena received a call. It was General Sloan. "We've secured your safety," he said. "You're no longer just a passenger, Ramirez. You're a guardian." She smiled faintly. "Thank you, General," she replied. "But I'm just getting started." The sun dipped below the horizon as Helena walked away from the city lights. The sky was wide and open, the same vast sky where the F-22s had once flown overhead, a reminder of the fragile peace she had helped protect. She was no longer a passenger in someone else's story. She was the author's own. And the flight to freedom had only just begun.